A mother's unyielding love and desperation. It was a warm spring afternoon when I saw something that would forever change my perception of loyalty and love. I was driving down a quiet road near the outskirts of town when I noticed a small figure in the distance, a scruffy dog walking slowly toward me. At first, I thought she was just another stray, as many dogs wander these parts looking for food or shelter. But as I got closer, my heart sank. In her mouth, the dog was carrying something small and lifeless. As I approached her, I could see that it was a puppy. My eyes locked onto the scene, my breath catching in my throat. The mother dog carefully set the lifeless pup on the ground, but she didn't move away. Instead, she hovered over it for a moment, sniffing gently at her child, perhaps looking for any sign of life that was no longer there. Her eyes, filled with sorrow and confusion, met mine. It was as if she was silently pleading for help, asking for something I wasn't sure how to give. The puppy lay completely still. There was no movement, no signs of life. It was clear that the little one had passed away, but the mother's bond with her child was so strong that she couldn't bear to leave it behind. Her distress was palpable. She sniffed around her baby, looking hopelessly at the lifeless form, then turned and came toward me as if asking me, a stranger, for help. She walked right up to me, her body tense with worry, her eyes wide and searching. I got out of the car slowly, unsure of how to approach this fragile moment. I knelt down to check on the puppy. It was heart-wrenching to see such a tiny life, so still, with its little body so vulnerable. There was no pulse, no signs of a heartbeat. The puppy's fur was thin and sparse, a clear sign of malnutrition or perhaps illness. It was too late for this one, but the mother, she was still looking at me with those eyes, filled with confusion and desperation. I could tell the mother had been struggling for food. Her fur, too, was sparse and patchy, and her ribs were clearly visible under her thin coat. She had been hungry for days, possibly weeks, and yet she kept walking, carrying her dead puppy with her, hoping that someone might notice and help. The depth of her pain was clear. She didn't want to leave her baby, but she also needed help. She had to move on, even though she had already lost so much. I couldn't turn away from this. I made the decision to help her. I gently stroked the mother's head and whispered comforting words as I picked up the puppy's small form. The mother dog, still watching me closely, seemed to relax for a moment, as though sensing that I wasn't here to harm her. I knew she needed more than just help with her puppy. She needed food, shelter, and most importantly, love. I put the puppy in the car, knowing there was little that could be done for it, but I couldn't leave the mother in her state. I turned the car around and headed back home. The road felt much longer now, with the weight of the moment settling on my shoulders. What had led this mother to bring her lifeless pup here, to me seeking help? When we got home, I immediately got the mother some food. She was starving, and she ate with abandon, devouring large mouthfuls with her head lowered. She barely stopped to breathe. I knew she had gone without for far too long, but even in her hunger, her instincts never wavered. Every time she heard the faint cries of her remaining puppies, she would pause mid-bite and look around, checking on them before continuing to eat. Her attention was divided, torn between satisfying her own hunger and making sure her other puppies were safe. The puppies were full of life. They played in the yard, running around with clumsy enthusiasm, their tiny bodies tumbling over one another as they explored the world. It was incredible to see how lively they were, despite the hardships they had already faced. The mother, though thin and weary, continued to care for them, checking on them after each cry, her instincts guiding her every move. As I sat there, watching the mother dog with her puppies, I marveled at her quiet strength. Despite everything she had gone through, she still took care of her remaining babies with great tenderness. She didn't mind when I played with them or picked them up for a moment. She just watched, her eyes full of trust, as if she knew I meant no harm. I couldn't help but feel a deep connection to this mother. She was so selfless, so devoted to her puppies, even in her own exhaustion. It was hard not to be moved by the sight of her. and I knew I had to help in any way I could. That evening, as we sat in the yard, I made a decision. I couldn't take the mother and all of her puppies into my home, as much as I wanted to. But I could take 3 of them and make sure they were safe, healthy, and loved. The mother dog seemed reluctant to let them go, but she understood. She watched as I picked up the 3 puppies, her eyes filled with both sadness and hope. She stayed close, following us as we walked to the car. But when we started driving, she started barking, running after us. It was a difficult moment, seeing her chase after us with such determination. It was as though she was telling us, "Please don't leave them behind." But I had to. I had to make sure the puppies survived, and I knew I couldn't take them all. So we stopped the car, let her calm down, and carefully picked 1 puppy to leave behind. The mother dog, after a few moments, picked up the remaining pup and trotted back to their den, finally settling back into the life she had fought so hard to protect. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this mother had more to teach me about love than I could ever comprehend. She had given everything for her babies, even when the odds were stacked against her. I couldn't help but wonder how many others like her were out there, fighting to survive and protect those they loved. Her story had just begun, and mine was forever changed by the mother's love and sacrifice, a mother's hope and unwavering care. The days that followed the first encounter with the mother dog felt like a whirlwind. The small, humble home I returned to that evening with the 3 puppies felt fuller than it ever had. I was unsure of what the next steps would be, but I knew one thing with certainty: this family needed to be cared for. The puppies, only a few weeks old, had their entire lives ahead of them, and though I had already witnessed the depth of their mother's devotion, I knew she was also in need of assistance. There was still so much left to be done. After I gave the puppies their first meal in their new environment, I made my way back to the area where I had found the mother dog. I couldn't simply walk away from her now, not when she was so desperately trying to care for what remained of her litter. I had promised myself that I would make sure they would survive, and I would do everything in my power to keep that promise. As I arrived at the place where the mother dog had brought her lifeless puppy, I could see her lying in the grass near the edge of the small shelter she had created. Her thin, bony body lay resting, her head perched up every now and then as she watched her remaining puppies with an unwavering vigilance. Her eyes still held that sadness, the weight of having lost one of her babies, yet there was a quiet determination there, a glimmer of hope, as if she knew she had to keep going for the others. I walked over slowly, not wanting to startle her. The moment she saw me, the mother's gaze softened, but there was still an edge of worry in her eyes. She had been through so much, yet there she was, still standing guard over her surviving puppies. Her coat, though sparse in places, seemed a little brighter under the soft glow of the setting sun, but the fatigue in her face was unmistakable. As I approached her, I carefully set down a small bowl of food. The mother sniffed it eagerly, her hunger apparent in the way she devoured it with large, desperate mouthfuls. I sat nearby, watching her, and though her focus remained on the food, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything she had been through. Despite her frailty, she continued to raise her puppies with an instinctual grace, even in the face of loss. There was no denying the bond she had with her remaining babies. Each time one of them cried out, the mother would pause, momentarily distracted from her meal, and turn her head toward the sound. She was listening, always alert to their needs. It was as if she could never rest fully, always checking on them, ensuring they were safe, their cries heard. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of admiration for her. She wasn't just a mother. She was a protector, a caregiver, a warrior in her own quiet way. I watched for a while, amazed by how the puppies were growing despite everything. They were healthy, even if a little on the thin side, their tiny bodies tumbling over one another as they explored the grass around them. They seemed so full of life, and their mother's protective gaze never wavered. She didn't mind when I sat nearby, or when I gently picked up one of her puppies to play with them. It was as if she trusted me, knowing that I would not harm them. It was a bittersweet feeling, knowing that the mother dog had given everything to ensure her babies had the chance to survive, and yet I could still see the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her thin frame, her ribs still visible under her fur, and the exhaustion in her eyes told a story of hardship, but also of an undying love for her pups. It was as if she was saying, "I have nothing left to give, but I will not stop fighting for you." As I stayed with them, I noticed the small gestures that spoke volumes about this mother's heart. Even when she was at her most tired, she would check on her puppies, nudging them gently with her nose, making sure they were settled, and sniffing them as if to reassure herself that they were all right. If one of them wandered too far or made a sound of distress, she would instantly stop whatever she was doing to attend to them, reminding me that for this mother dog, her priorities were clear. In the moments that followed, as I sat watching the small family, I began to feel the weight of responsibility for their well-being. I knew I couldn't take them all home with me, but I couldn't abandon them either. The shelter I had built for the mother and her puppies was a start, but it wasn't enough. I had to do more, especially if I wanted to give them a chance to live without fear of hunger or exposure. I began thinking about how I could create a more permanent and comfortable space for them. After dinner, I returned to the site with a plan. I would build them a proper shelter, something stronger, something that would stand up to the weather. The area was small, but I knew I could make something functional with the tools I had. It would be simple, but it had to be enough to keep them safe. Working quietly, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, I gathered what I could. A few stones, some extra wood and blankets I had at home. I spent hours constructing the shelter, making sure it would keep them warm and dry. I even elevated it slightly so it wouldn't be so damp on the ground. The last thing I wanted was for the mother dog to feel like she had no choice but to risk her puppy's health to survive. When I was finished, I looked at my work with a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than the makeshift shelter they had before. It was a place where they could rest, sleep, and feel a sense of security. The mother dog cautiously walked over to inspect the structure, her gaze lingering on the work I had done. She sniffed the area, then looked up at me with a quiet expression of gratitude, her tail wagging softly. I knew that the battle was far from over. The journey for this little family was just beginning, and there would be many more steps to take. But in this moment, as I watched the mother dog rest in the new shelter with her puppies at her side, I couldn't help but feel hopeful. There was still so much love to be shared between them, and I was going to do everything in my power to ensure that this mother's sacrifice was not in vain. Her determination to protect her puppies had touched me deeply, and now it was my turn to give back in any way I could. In the days to come, I would continue to watch over them, bringing food, checking on the puppies, and making sure the mother had everything she needed. Her love was unyielding, and I promised myself I would do everything I could to make sure she never had to face another struggle alone. The unbreakable bond and the promise of a new beginning. As the days passed, the little family began to flourish in the shelter I had made for them. The puppies grew stronger, their tiny bodies becoming more agile and playful, their eyes brighter with curiosity and joy. They explored the small patch of grass in front of their shelter, chasing after each other, their playful barks filling the air with life. The mother dog, now more at ease, watched over them with a soft gaze, her body no longer as thin and frail as it had once been. Though the road ahead would not be easy, there was something undeniably special about the quiet bond between them. I returned each day to check on the family, making sure they had enough food and water, and providing whatever care they needed. But every time I approached the shelter, I was met with the same warm, trusting eyes of the mother dog. She had grown used to my presence, and despite her initial reluctance, she had accepted me into her world, allowing me to help without hesitation. Her instincts had guided her to bring her puppies to me, and in return, I had vowed to give them the chance at a better life. One morning, as I walked toward the shelter, I saw the mother dog sitting at the entrance, looking out over the horizon. Her posture was calm, but there was a certain watchfulness in her demeanor, as if she was contemplating something important. As I got closer, she stood up and walked toward me, wagging her tail with a quiet excitement. I knelt down to greet her, and she nuzzled my hand, as if saying, "Thank you." The puppies, now old enough to run freely, bounded over to me, their tiny paws tapping against the ground in excitement. I laughed as they crawled all over me, licking my hands and face in their playful enthusiasm. The joy in their eyes, the trust in their movements, made my heart swell with happiness. These little souls, who had once been at risk of never seeing the light of day, were now thriving, their future full of possibility. It was then that I realized something profound. The bond between the mother dog and her puppies was a reflection of something much larger than just survival. It was a reminder that even in the most challenging circumstances, love and care can create the conditions for growth and transformation. The mother, though weary from the struggles of her past, had never given up on her babies, and now, with each passing day, she was seeing the fruit of her unwavering love. And in that love, she had created something more than just a safe space for her puppies. She had created a community, a family, one that was bound together by trust and gratitude. But what stood out most was the transformation I saw in the mother. She had come to me in desperation, carrying her dead puppy, seeking help. But now, she was a new dog, a dog who had found peace, stability, and most importantly, love. Her coat was shinier, her steps were stronger, and her eyes, once filled with sadness, were now full of hope. The puppies were a symbol of that hope, a living testament to the resilience and strength of a mother's love. In the days that followed, I began to feel that it was time for the family to start a new chapter. The mother had proven herself to be a devoted protector, and the puppies had proven their ability to grow, thrive, and play. It was time to find them all a permanent home, a place where they could continue to live and be loved. I had been preparing for this moment, knowing that it was the right thing to do. I had already begun to reach out to adoption centers, and through local networks, I found a wonderful family who was eager to welcome them into their hearts. The day came when I had to say goodbye to the little family. It was bittersweet. I stood by the shelter, watching as the puppies, now strong and healthy, hopped into the car of their new family, their tails wagging with excitement. The mother dog, too, followed, her eyes filled with the quiet understanding that her journey was not over. She had given everything for her puppies, and now they were ready to spread their wings. As the car drove off, I watched them disappear down the road, my heart heavy with the knowledge that they were going to a better place, but also filled with pride for everything they had overcome. The mother had done it. She had brought them to safety, and together, they had found hope in the most unlikely of places. And though I was no longer physically with them, I knew that the love and care they had received would stay with them forever. The mother dog had carried her dead puppy with her to ask for help, and in doing so, she had found not only rescue, but also the promise of a new beginning. In the end, their story was not just one of survival, it was a story of love, of resilience, and of the power of hope. And as I looked up at the sky, I couldn't help but smile, knowing that their journey was only just beginning, and that they would continue to be loved, safe, and cherished for the rest of their lives. Love, after all, always finds a way. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.